All right, my friends, let's talk about developing the high school sprinter, jumper, hurdler, and the best way to go about doing that. So this presentation is going to cover this topic from two angles. The first angle is from the perspective of developing the athlete who competes in sprints, hurdles, and jumps, or sprints and hurdles, jumps, etc. Right? And so we're going to cover what the most efficient method for planned balance in their training is. How do we make sure that the athlete hits all of the biomotor skills, all the physical capacities, as well as all the technical elements of their different events without having to sacrifice workouts or training options? Also, we want to keep the athlete on schedule, right? If we do a speed day workout on Monday, we don't want that, and they are with, say, the sprints group, we don't want them to have to come back and do the Monday hurdle workout on Tuesday. Now they're off schedule, or we don't have planned balance. It's going to be a mess, and it turns into chaos that way. And when we're not organized, that's the problem we run into. The second angle, oops, messed this up a bit, is from the coaching standpoint. How do we as coaches simplify our planning so that we can run essentially distinct sprints, hurdles, and jumps groups without having to write 3 separate plans every single day where we're writing 3 workouts a day? That's not practical for the high school coach. It's not practical for anybody, really, particularly when we're dealing with these large groups and there's so much carryover between events. And, of course, we want to prevent chaos when we're not organized and we're not exactly sure what we're doing and we don't have a plan or a theme. Workouts get out of control. Kids get lost in the shuffle. I would be lying to you if I said I had never lost a kid in the shuffle somewhere. I'll give you a specific example. A couple years ago, I had a kid who was one of my best high jumper, a 6'8" high jumper, also a good hurdler, a 21 change long jumper, and he had gone between event groups that day. And what happened was he ended up pulling his hamstring because when I said to go do the hurdle work, he did not do part of the hurdle work. He tried to do the whole workout on top of his other work and injured himself. So we have to prevent that, and when we're more organized, we can make sure that doesn't happen. So here's an important thing to remember before we get too deep in terms of defining what our program is and what the goals are. Your program is defined as much by what you don't do as it is by what you do. So you can, because I get this question a lot from people, well, if I have my sprinter doing block work and they're not doing long jump work, how are they getting better at long jump? Well, there's an answer to that in terms of understanding commonalities, but that's a choice that you have to make. If your sprinter is doing block work, he is not doing long jump work. So you have to consider that you can't have your cake and eat it too. You have to make some sacrifices. So we have to make that choice. That's the art of coaching, when we decide who's going to do what and on what day and how many and how often. And the key to that is understanding the patterns. I'm a huge patterns nerd, but it really comes down to commonalities, a commonalities-based approach to training. I did not make this up. I did not invent it. I stole it. And so what do we mean by that? What are these commonalities? Well, there's a lot of carryover between events and the technical aspects of them, as well as the biomotor skills. It's just understanding how to plan those out. So I'll give you an example, then we'll go to video, right? The hurdle cut step versus the long jump takeoff, right? You have your hurdler jumper. Well, that cut step, that takeoff step in the sprint hurdles, or any hurdles, is very similar in mechanics to the, say, long jump takeoff, right? We want to get good displacement, say with the hurdle cut step takeoff. Let's say you're a left leg lead. With that right leg hits the ground, we're pulling it back. We want to get good displacement so our hip is as far away from our support foot or support leg as possible. And obviously with our female hurdlers, we're just trying to have them to go right over the hurdle. And with our male hurdlers, up and over the hurdle. But we want to have a lot of commonalities between those. So we have an athlete who's with the long jumpers, say doing full approach jumps, but they're also developing the hurdle cut step and vice versa. So we got to think about that. That's why, because I work in a program where I'm not blessed with extremely gifted athletes, I have to try to make as many multi-eventers as possible so we can try to be competitive. But let's talk about the example we're going to use today, drive phase or acceleration, right? How, say, Monday's your speed day. How do you address this skill for the sprints and the hurdles and the jumps without having to spend your whole life writing and planning workouts? How do we get this all done? So let's take a look. So here's our example, and then we'll go to video, right? And so I'm going to just when we get to the video next, I'm just going to let you just look at the commonalities between them so you can kind of see how they all fit together. So, right, so let's say that for our technical stuff, we do a warm-up, especially if we're early in the season. We do our warm-up. We have the whole group, right? We talk about the skills of acceleration, cutting the grass, that low hill recovery for the first 2 full steps, right? Remember, particularly, or at the very least with our athletes, from block clearance, from movement through the full 2 steps, they're going to reach, at least with these kids, probably more, 50% of their max velocity in those first 2 full steps, right? And by step 10, they're like 80% or plus with these guys of their top speed. So I spend a lot of time on that first 10 meters. So we do the Cassano hurdle push drill to work on those mechanics. Probably did wall drill first. So then, now of course you could keep the whole team together and just do 10s, and everybody's getting specific training because it's early in the season. But if you want to break off by event group, you have your sprinters say they're doing block 10s. Now, if this is real early in the season, my sprinters are not coming out of blocks. I'll tell you that right now. That's a privilege, not a right, and they will complain about it incessantly. Then you have sprint hurdles doing blocks over 1 hurdle. Similar distance, similar technique. Obviously, we could talk about the nuances of the sprint hurdles going into a shuffle and the approach and all that. And then rollover accelerations, say off runway with your jumpers, where you're teaching them the rollover start that they're going to be using to initiate all their jumps. The wall drill and the hurdle push tied it all together. Block 10s, blocks over 1 hurdle, rollover accelerations. It's all developing the same skills and techniques. So let's look at that video and then talk about how this is important, how we look at the rest of the program. Okay, so we saw that. We can look at the commonalities. We can look at the similarities between the training. What are the benefits? We get consistent energy system development. Monday, we're doing the speed day. It's a neuro day. All event groups are getting the same energy system training. So you're not going to have your sprinters, say, do an intensive tempo, long sprinters, say, do an intensive tempo, short sprinters doing acceleration work, jumpers doing short approach jumps, everyone to do something different. So when you have athletes to do multiple events, now they're missing out on a bunch of stuff today. If they stay in one group, they're doing multiple energy systems. If they do, say, half hurdles, half jumps, from a coaching standpoint, we're keeping everything on course. We're coloring between the lines, and we are able to monitor volume and move kids between event groups if we need to, because we know that whether they're at hurdle, sprints, or jumps, we're essentially covering the same technical skills and energy system skills. Again, we have that planned balance. Right now, you can decide if you're the coach. Do you want, your top athlete who's your best long jumper and best, say, 110 hurdler to stay the entire day with the 110 hurdles and work over 1 hurdle? Do you want them to do rollover starts or approach type work? Do you want them to do half and half? You can make that decision and know that tomorrow they're going to be ready to do whatever comes next. So that's what you have to decide as a coach. How do I do that? When you got a bunch of different kids doing different things, I'll be honest, I don't have time to get that complicated. I got like 75 kids. When you decide to break up and practice into different event groups, you're going to get, that group of kids who do multiple events who are going to stand there and ask you which event group they go to. For your very top kids, you're going to know what you want them to do. But a lot of times, you're just kind of looking at them and just going, you go to jumps. Why don't you go to do half the sprints and then go do half hurdles? Why don't you... actually, you know what? What do you want to do today? Oh, you want to hurdle? Okay, why don't you go hurdle? Let's not make it more complicated than it is. It's a bunch of little kids. Exercise in a planned way that addresses energy systems and technique is going to get them in shape. We're not talking about, trying to get girls under 13 in the 100 hurdles. At least I'm not. If you are, I don't think you need this video. Right, and then simplified planning and practice management. when you know you're going to speed day and you know you understand what the different speed qualities for that time of year for your different event groups are, you study training and you don't just kind of make stuff up or steal people's annual plans. And then practice management. It's easier to manage the group when everyone's kind of doing the same thing. If you got a booty lock workout going on over here and full approach jumps going over there and some kids doing approaches off runway over here and 400 hurdlers doing, over 4 or 5 hurdles and sprint hurdlers it's chaos. It's pandemonium. But now everybody's doing the kind of same thing. It makes it easier for you to manage what's going on, to bring the group together, to send kids between groups. That's the easy way to do it. And here's something that you have to think about that a lot of coaches don't. Probably the coaches that don't are the coaches that are not watching this video, but when you're organized like that, kids notice. Kids see that you planned practice. You didn't just make stuff up on the way in. You didn't just chuck some crap together during your prep period. Kids recognize when their coaches don't know what they're doing. Trust me. I get emails from them. I get emails from their parents. I speak to them at clinics, and they come to me and tell me, this is crazy. What's going on here? We don't do this at practice. My coach doesn't do this stuff. It's chaos. Everybody's doing something different. When kids feel like you're organized in running your practice, they're more confident that what they're doing is going to make them better. They're going to work a little bit harder. It's like when I go to meets, right, with my athletes, and we see kids doing nonsense warm-ups and really bad technique with drills and doing full-speed relay handoffs at 8 o'clock in the morning. My kids look at that and say, oh, man, I'm going to beat these people because this is nonsense. And so you cannot assume that just because you're the adult in charge, again, I grew up in the world before the internet. There was no going online. There's no going to CompleteTrackandField.com and seeing what good coaches are doing. Kids can do that these days. And if you're just making stuff up as you go along, they know that because they complain about it. And so you develop confidence, and kids give you the benefit of the doubt when you say something, you ask them to do something that's difficult because they see that you're organized. You have a plan. Cannot underestimate the mental side of things, even with the little things, like just making it look like you planned practice that day. So that's just a little taste of what I'm going to cover in this presentation. If you have questions, of course, you can ask them below. If you want more information like this, let me know. I'm thinking about doing an entire program on it, but if people don't want it, well, I'm not going to do it. So hopefully that gave you a little bit of insight. Obviously, we covered a pretty easy day. If we start to get to like Tuesday booty lock workout for 400 hurdles, and then, short approach jumps for jumpers, it gets a little bit more complicated, but again, I'll be glad to cover all of that.